thank you, Mitch and Patrick, for joining us this morning. I guess my role today is to guide us through the journey, the culture journey for the Red Roses rugby team from the two viewpoints. So from your two viewpoints, our belief about culture change journeys is there's always different roles. There's the leader. Mitch, you are very much the leader, the head coach. You are the leader, the head coach. That defines the ambition, the strategy, the vision. And Patrick, as the leadership and culture coach for the Red Roses, you're that architect role that creates the roadmap for the direction of travel. And then we also have our group of first followers, that leadership group of players, that's the senior leaders that really own and drive that culture forward. So we're going to dive into some questions. So Mitch, the first question I'd like to dive into is around what culture is for you, and what do you believe is the ingredients that make a good culture?
Yeah, hi Ollie, Patrick, and everyone. For me, it's firstly the leadership is the one that creates the culture. I've also, through experience and stuff, it's pretty broad, isn't it? It can be pretty messy because you're dealing with individuals as well. So how do you bring all those shared experiences into one? So with the kind of the result in mind, like if you want to guarantee people a really good experience, then what does that need to look like? What does that need to feel like? What does that need to act like? But you've still definitely got to go through the messy part of it first and get everyone to share their bits and pieces. So you've got to allow everyone to have their own story. And then obviously you've got to then try and bring them into where you are at that particular moment. And then also bear in mind that always be searching for something that has a higher purpose, I guess, that's bigger than yourself.
Nice. Thanks, Mitch. And Patrick, I know you've worked in sport for a number of years, but you also work with global leadership teams in business. From your perspective, when it comes to culture, what do you see as the same in elite sport, and what do you see as different from a business perspective?
Yeah, I think the first thing is, in many ways, there's probably more the same than there is different. So definitely the process feels the same. So as Mitch has already alluded to, you have to get kind of everybody's viewpoint. So you have to create some sort of moment in time where people can sort of honour their history and sort of be honest about now, and then start this sort of process of hope for the future when you're sort of rebuilding culture, or when you're redefining culture, perhaps from a performance perspective. I think it's a bit rawer in sport, which is ace, so you can see it, and you have a benefit often of the population of people you're affecting is smaller, so you can get your arms around them a bit bigger. So I think people might be surprised how many is involved in an elite team. I think Mitch has to get to know a lot of names. You could have 40 people in camp, but players, but perhaps 60, 70, 80 might be involved over a period of time. We could have 20 staff. So it's bigger than people think, but it's not the same as 20,000 people across the globe in an organisation. But I think the principles, as I say, are the same. Also, I think when people think about sport, they often picture the pitch, and it's pretty easy to get people lined up, within an 80-minute period to win a game. Culturally, if you've got everything else right, that part, the common purpose is obvious. I think it's much harder to get a common purpose across some players who may not play, some players who are competing for positions, staff members that are perhaps trying to protect from a medical perspective, others that are all about performance. So there's a lot of complexity within a broader squad setup. You're on mute, Ollie. Doesn't record well.
I was saying thank you, Patrick. So I guess diving into let's throw back to kind of the start of the journey, Mitch, in 2023 when you came on board as the head coach of the Red Roses, and you were also coaching Japan men's rugby team at the time. At the start of the journey, what was your vision for the Red Roses, and why was courage, bond and lead so important for you as values for them?
Yeah, I think the curiosity, initially was how come they haven't got something done that they've wanted over the last 11 years. So I think that was the first question that I was curious about. So like most leaders, I think you would do a diagnosis of like of the past. I think it's helpful. You can either get that directly from the person who was the leader or somebody that's had an important role within, or generally, collaborate um, with the heads of department. But there's generally not a full clean out of people, is there, going between cycles. So um, yeah, going back to that thinking was, well, firstly, I think what life has taught me, I've made a lot of mistakes as a coach where I've gone to the rugby context first, and ultimately that's taught me to go, well, culture needs to come first. So what are the values that are going to guide us? I can only really offer something that's guided me. And if I'm going to lead authentically, I would like to be part of those values strongly, rather than I guess really having to dial up my why or my connection to become part of that. So I think I've got to set the intent, don't I? I've got to let people know kind of like what I think success looks like, and that will create um, a very strong a team, stronger than others. So um, courage for me came from the fact that um, I don't think I realized my full potential until 29 years of age. Um, I came back home from an under 20 trial with New Zealand as a 19-year-old, missed out on the team, thought I would make it because I was playing first division rugby, and my father said it's only one person's opinion. Um, that didn't really help at the time, as you could imagine, but finally got my head around that. And then I got a phone call 10 years later from a lady down the road when I was working as a quantity surveyor, and she said to me, come and meet me. So she was 30 miles away. I wouldn't have gone, but it was probably the best decision I've ever made. I'd love to know where she lives now and if she's still alive, to say thank you. Walked in the door and she said, been watching you from afar, very successful captain of the provincial team. You're national champions for the last 2 years. You've toppled Auckland, who had a great period. But what do you want to do? I said I wouldn't mind playing in an All Black trial to see whether I can play against the best players in the like in the country. I've been playing for long enough. And she said, "Do you not think that's somewhat limiting?" And I said, "It probably comes from the fact that my learnt process as a quantity surveyor is foundations to roof. So I was taking each step of the stairway. But she said, "Well, why don't you focus on the landing?" And that really resonated with me about the end point. Um, and she said, "What's the end point this year?" And I said, "The British tour to, the All Blacks are going to Britain." Um, and little did I know that through that person changing the way I think, um, it gave me an opportunity, and I made that team 3 or 4 months later. If I hadn't have come across that kind of leadership, I probably would have never ever got that opportunity. So why do I serve and lead now? I'm really just here to try and help people realize their full potential, not be like me, who limited my potential for 10 years. Bond, I think because I've lived in a number of different cultures in the world, I've seen the value of food and how it connects people and allows people to communicate, I guess, effectively, comfortably. It's kind of like almost like a fast way to connect. It's almost like a fast way to belong. And it's also a fast way to believe in who you're with. So, Japan's obviously has little spaces and people work hard there, and food is the value for them. So and then obviously South Africa, the braai, which is very much social connection around a fire and outstanding food. So I've just seen some really great examples. I'm not saying that my culture in New Zealand or in England is any different, but you certainly see how the value of food takes people away from all their bits and pieces, locks them in, and they can have a really good experience. And then the third thing is I have also come from a background where I had to work and become an elite sports person. But the way that I was brought up, and probably no different to the girls, because we're dealing with professionals, some that want to be and some that are totally non-professional and part-time, is that, I used to have my banana and my coffee at 3 o'clock to get me through training at 6 o'clock. So I had to find ways to lead myself and not rely just on the program. Whereas these days, the program often, or some players have the mindset around that it can rescue them, and it's the everything. But the everything is actually leading yourself and your ability to identify your quality actions and more actions, and that requires study, and that requires your own leverage, doesn't it? But also seeking advice along the way.
And you totally see that in how the Roses play and how they are as human beings, how they live with courage and to fulfill their potential. You can see the bond between each other, between the staff and the group, as well as how they really lead themselves in owning their own journey. Yeah, totally. As an outsider looking in, you can really see those values being lived, which is amazing to witness. So Patrick, just thinking from your perspective and I guess how you supported Mitch kind of architect the journey for the group, it'd be great to hear a little bit about your role in that.
Yeah, so as you said, or as Mitch alluded to, some might not know this, but we were the best team in the world. However, we'd lost 2 games out of the last, I can't remember, maybe 45. And they were both World Cup finals. So as Mitch said, it was really intriguing to understand how we getting so close, but not quite getting there. I think, like the rest of the team, I was pumped to have Mitch as the coach. With the level of experience of this coach who was coming in was incredible, but it was a little intimidating as well for the players. It was for me too. And of course, the first time we met as a camp to kind of reset, Mitch was coming in, via a Teams call like this. We got this sort of 6'5" Kiwi booming through and telling us about courage and lead, and it was pretty inspirational at the time. And I remember from a architect point of view, I started with okay, so is this something that we're going to co-create, or are we going to be sort of really clear? And Mitch was clear. This is that we were going to take this team somewhere it's not been before. We've got to be clear how we're going to do that, and I think that's probably a really good business learning too. I think we're often very keen to create co-creation within our teams, and I think that's really important when you get to the ownership of it. But I think what was clear here was that Mitch was setting some standards for us based authentically on what he believed we needed to do. So then we had a really good license then to make it our own. We used a lot of metaphor. So we got the team firstly talking about belonging. So as Mitch said, it's about getting all of our stories. So everybody found an image about what it meant to belong in a culture they wanted to belong to. They played that into the room. We talked about it. We created a big wall of belonging. And then we started to talk about these 3 words. We used some metaphor again, heard some great stories. For example, courage for this team. Eventually, somebody told the story of Malala and how she had showed a little video of how she'd actually been shot going to school. And this little girl just sort of said, look, I just want to be a doctor. And it captured everybody's hearts in terms of what it meant to have courage. So we did that process across Courage, Bond and Lead, and came up with a way of thinking about that was really special for us.
Thanks, Patrick. That's great to hear about that architecture piece. So Mitch, from your experience, where there has been a common like unifying purpose as a team and where there hasn't, like what has been the difference or the impact on results and on performance?
Um, I think you see a lot more selfishness, um, a lot more me, to put it simply, in the quality of the actions, in in the fact that they can't find more actions on the field. So then it becomes a little bit more excuse based. Whereas if there's something being created by the group and you've been part of that, um, and that is valued, and that's what's been agreed to guide us through a period of time to achieve success as a team. Um, then I think you've almost got a reference. You've got a almost a foundation of credibility to be able to take the player back to that. And as you know, people can tend to forget those values and how important they are and what we agree to, because each individual why um, doesn't necessarily um, live those values immediately, do they? So I think it's the coaches and the leaders' responsibility to say, hey, you need to dial up here, because yeah, this is really important. Are you aware that you're doing this? Or you need to dial down here, because this is not how we live, and the continued exposure of this is going to be costly to us as a group, and more importantly, you're not going to have the experience that we would like you to have. And I think as a result of that, I think people really need to know, most importantly, is that you care about them as a result of the values and the objective. And I think once they get that through the vehicle or the conduit of values, then I think you eat away at the individualism that might be dialing up too much, or might be too far away.
Much richness in that. Thanks, Mitch. And Patrick, we all would have those that I guess followed the Roses through their World Cup journey would have seen the For the Girls campaign, and I guess how that gave goosebumps in such a positive way. How did that unifying purpose as a group come about?
Yeah, so they did a great job of that, didn't they? In terms of creating something that was interesting for the public. Yeah, it was very much an internal thing for us. So we had that for I think probably 2 years prior to the World Cup, and it became an expression that was just helpful to kind of pull together a lot of the whys. So we often think of common purpose a little bit like if each person's individual why is a string, and all of those whys can kind of come together and mesh into a strong rope. So what we're trying to do is really understand people's whys and then really sort of move them into one space. And it took us a little while to sort of get there. So we spent a lot of time sharing why we were there. So a lot of into the evening chats, a lot of people bring in objects to share, to explain why they play rugby, why it's important to be part of this team, why it matters to them to have the success together with this team. A lot of images to share, and stories about family members and other people that really sort of are important to us. And what we've actually found is they sort of fit roughly into four camps. So for some people, it was about those players who've gone before. So actually players like you, Ollie, who played for the Roses at the time, perhaps where we didn't have the best facilities. Maybe you had to pay for your own fares to get somewhere, and play in front of a few hundred people to make the pave the way for 84,000 people to watch this team play in a World Cup final. So for some, it was for the girls who've been before. Some for it was for the girls in the crowd. They could see the inspiration they were giving, and boys too, but that sort of that feeling of helping youngsters. And then also there was a little bit of for me as a little girl. So for some of the players, perhaps played in a generally a boys team. Maybe they were not necessarily accepted as to who they were, but they were accepted as part of the game, and they wanted to make sure that everything that they done there was meaningful and came through. And then finally for some it was a look around the changing room. It was, I don't actually care about any of that stuff. I just care about this group, and often referred to as the girls. So the language for the girls became one of those great high purposes, which allowed everybody to sort of play in what was important to them. I imagine for some people a bit all those four might have been, but often something very specific was really, really important to someone. They could hang into that statement.
Love that. I love the idea of that individual, that personal purpose, and how it ladders up to that higher purpose as a team. So Mitch, just thinking about that leadership group that I guess your first followers in the Red Roses context. How important is that leadership group for you in relation to culture? And do you always have a leadership group in the squads that you work with?
Yeah, leadership groups are an interesting exercise, because I think over the 30 years, I'm not sure what the right number is. So I don't think there's anything standard around it. I think it's a feeling of who you think reflects the values, and do you have the enough breadth within your leadership group to cover all the aspects of, I guess, of caring about people and the objective. So with that in mind, you select the people initially. I think over time, the leadership group probably knows who's the next people that should come in. Should people have to leave or ill, or in our case we have pregnancies. So and all those factors need to be taken into consideration. So for me, it's they definitely need to reflect the values. Like all leadership groups, I think your own leadership needs to change the way they think. Naturally, they come in with and it's the courage to challenge them to change the way they think as well in your own leadership. So there's a number of factors that you've got to consider, and then I think consistency of your language that you use, consistency of myself as a leader, the calmness, and then there's the ability going, well, what do you want to solve? And what do you want me to help you with solving? So, yeah, we were very fortunate through Patrick's and his team to be able to develop some new processes around, bridging between heads of department, and also before tournaments, identifying the people that who's going to be on board in the tournament, and how does the culture cart sort of determine who we probably need to communicate to before the tournament even starts, or anticipate what might be happening. So to give you some examples, yeah, there was an example of the values being created and the bridging commencing, I think 4 tournaments in. I think one of the medical staff basically on exit medicals came to me in Vancouver and said, look, 3 or 4 players have not done their medicals, and I think there's 2 leaders or 3 leaders in that group. I'm not very happy about that. They need to change their behaviour, blah, blah, blah. And I paused and went, oh, what are you going to do about it? And he then recognised in the moment that, yeah, it's his responsibility to lead. And because that's the whole idea of bridging. So he would then go to the player who's or the leader in the leader group around medical. He would go to that person and they would solve it again, either player or head of department. Conversely, with the culture card, there's always because our girls play in other competitions, the potential for residual relationship breakdowns from previous tournament or during competition. So it's important to be around all those sort of relationship issues. On this particular occasion, there were two people that were talking about, a player and a staff member. The leaders wanted to speak to the staff member, but they wanted me to prime that person for their meeting. And then the girls went to me and said, look, we've tried to change behaviour here with this player. We're having no success. Can you help us solve that? So can you take responsibility for that? So it's a very shared sort of process, shared mechanism, if you like. And then we obviously bring our actions, or back to the table. And it's a really fulfilling process, actually. And ultimately what you're doing is you're growing your young leaders, and in our case young women, to become better leaders for current situations, and potentially new exposure to new situations down the track.
Thanks, Mitch. And Patrick, what was your role in supporting the leadership group? How did you work with them?
Yeah, so it was awesome to work with the leaders. So Mitch gave us a lot of rope to support. Initially 7 players. We've had some great movement during the time, and some have come, some have gone. All have added great value. And just to be a specialist coach. So there are coaches in rugby setups for things like kicking, which is a specialist activity, and I was able to be the coach for the 7 leaders to support them around what for some was it was probably not true that it was a new skill, because they lead always, but actually formalizing that and thinking about leadership in a different way was really helpful. So we'd meet regularly as a group, create some in camp, talk about some of the issues and things to resolve, and sort of work together as a group in that. And we also had 2 or 3 sort of great off-site moments as well. So going away for the day, creating some experiences together. We took them to one of our great clients, Miele, and exposed them to having to present in front of 100 staff with 30 minutes notice, and just creating different types of leadership pressure from ones that they were used to. So great privilege for me.
Thanks, Patrick. I can only imagine how that landed, that challenge around having 30 minutes to prepare a presentation for 30 business a whole heap of business leaders. So high impact stuff. Mitch, just thinking about your role as a leader and having to make those big calls, and also thinking, of how many changes that often happen, and sometimes unexpected challenges that crop up. Thinking about significant change that you made around a captain change during your World Cup journey. Tell us about that decision, and how did you go about managing that challenge?
Yeah, it's always a tricky situation, making changes, especially to leadership, or to the outside world, a title. Also, you've got to understand that the person that you have selected and potentially are changing, that person's touched a lot of fans, and sometimes you don't think about that dynamic, or the consequences of that. And because if it's a very experienced player, and in this case it was, and a centurion who's gone through the evolution of the women's game, it's kind of like she's touched an enormous amount of people. So when you communicate this, you're going to make sure that you communicate effectively, so that I guess the noise that she will receive, even though it's as hard as it is, can be seen as genuinely caring, authentic, and then obviously understand the performance reasons. Why do I say that? Because I've I've had those situations before, and I don't think I've done them as effectively because I haven't shown the outside world that I care enough about the person, um, and therefore you get judged heavily, which then I think potentially in today's world could have a huge impact. Well, the noise can have a huge impact on the individual. So um, the planning of it, Patrick and I had some conversations. Obviously, a few other experienced people that I respect around the world as well. So I say that I'm not just the one person making decisions. I'm so grateful to be surrounded by really, really good people, and even more so when you you have to make really important decisions. So for me, it was like, yeah, I'm not sure how this is going to go, but I think the timing's right, and it was a bit of a gut feel as well. Um, you know, without going into too much detail, the player had been sent 3 or 4 messages previously around the same area to in a performance gap that we felt that would enhance and help her perform more consistently. That didn't happen. And then obviously the competition became greater, and therefore the decision had to be made. So how could I help that player become a really important role, or play a really important role and contribute to gold, in our case in the World Cup, even though I'm taking away I guess the title of captain, which is huge. So the decision was made, it was communicated. That person continued in the leadership group. That person continued and played captain again, but not on a regular basis. And eventually, I think they fully understood the role that they could play, and I guess the value that they've always contributed at a higher level, probably in their thoughts, but in actual fact, they were going to spread their leadership in different ways throughout the 3 roles within the team. So all that complexity has got to be taken into account. And yeah, it doesn't always come off, but for some reason, it did come off, and I think that's a testament to the player and herself. A huge respect for the way that she handled it, managed it, got over her wobbles, because everyone wobbles and they're entitled to wobble. But I think it was a really good team effort, and the fact that I spread my leadership in this area as well, and just didn't make a hasty sort of biased individual decision was also probably what complemented a good result.
Thanks, Mitch, and thanks for sharing your vulnerability of your learnings previously on how that's made it so successful, and also just how much the audience will relate to that around having to make big calls and trusting your gut and your instinct, as well as managing, people changes which happen all the time, and how to navigate that seamlessly and smoothly is super important. So, Patrick, from your architect point of view, what role did you play in supporting that unexpected change and challenge?
So yeah, it felt like a really pivotal moment. I think I agree with you, Ollie, that I think people relate to it from a business perspective. So I think firstly, I think we're really lucky in this because we had good humans in everything. So Mitch has already talked about the importance it was personally to him for this to be right. The outgoing captain, was awesome in it, and the rest of the leadership. So I think the key things for me was, it's probably something about the fact we invested in a broad group to start with. So, we had 6 or 7 leaders that we invested in sort of equally. And I don't know, Mitch has been around the block a lot of times. So whether that was part of the thinking, it may not be that who we choose as captain 3 years later is actually going to be quite right for the moment. So we had 6 or 7 leaders, all of which I think could have stood in as captain and a great potential candidate when we made the change. I think there's something about great timing. So and the sort of personal element. So Mitch gave time to the person and spoke to them, and then gave them time to really sort of go through their, as Mitch says, wobbles. You're going to have a reaction to something like that. And I was lucky enough to be able to be nearby then too, and just to help work through the difference between perhaps a reaction and a response. So nice safe space to have a reaction, and then coming back with an awesome response. And then there was a bit of architecture around getting that leadership group together quickly afterwards, and really getting people to talk that through. And there's a lot of emotion, concern for Marley as she was going through a big change, and then a real strong wish to support Zoe as the new captain, and Marley composed herself to really lean into supporting Zoe and giving her 100% commitment, and that just led the way into a smooth transition. And look back now and think that made us stronger for sure, but it could have been a heck of a wobble just in that moment. And as I think testament to everybody, not least the player, that became a real strength actually.